Hello, students. This is Professor Globe. Let's get things going for week 12 lecture. 1 second. Let me share this out. Let's see. Okay, should be sharing. Put this in presentation mode here. And so let me double check. One. I just want to double check I'm sharing correctly. It's always very confusing to me. Is it doing it right or not? Okay, we're in week 12, information security and assurance. Our topics today are security policy and procedures and operating system security. Let's jump into it. So, in security policies and procedures, um, policies define high-level statements of intent covering what needs to be done and why. This is usually applies to the organization or organization-wide to include all divisions, all departments. Um, Real good examples of that is, um, um, operating systems or access control um, policies, strong password policies that apply to all systems, all staff and employees. A standard um, specifies mandatory controls um, and metrics to be enforced um, to enforce a policy compliance. So a standard could be that all operating systems will be Mac OS for laptops, Linux systems or Unix-based systems for servers, and for desktops, Windows-based systems. That'll be our standard. And that can be one standard document they put in place, or one policy, or multiple policies, one for laptops, one for servers, one for desktops. A procedure is a detailed step-by-step process on how to implement the standard. So you would have procedures on installation. They should be secure installations of a Mac OS, a secure installation and configuration of a Linux or Unix-based operating system for a server, and then a specific secure installation and configuration of Windows operating systems on your desktops. Guidelines are non-mandatory recommendations or best practices. Those examples would be best guidelines for using PowerPoint slides, best guidelines for creating a PowerPoint slide, best guidelines for writing a introductory letter on a company letterhead. So those are non-mandatory but recommendations or best practices that a organization can create to basically have consistency, quality control, those types of things. Other policy examples could include, but not limited to, regulatory frameworks such as GDPR, centers around data privacy, European HIPAA around medical patient privacy, PCI DSS, financial transaction um, for payments, um, security, and different policies are influenced by legal and regulatory requirements. And so if you are a bank or a business running in a European country or a financial bank or fintech doing some type of financial transactions, whether it's, you have ATMs all over the city, you need to be compliant with these regulations, which means you have to write to policies, standards, and procedures to enforce them, and maybe even guidelines on how to communicate patient record requirements, um, procedures on configuring operating systems in a hospital, um, a standard on the versions and patch management of those operating systems and other software running on patient management systems, et cetera. So then you would have policy maybe on access control, maybe it's role-based access control, password policies for strong passwords. Organizations in the legal and financial or fintech sectors have to create policies that govern data protection or controls, with the emphasis on how each regulatory has unique control requirements, impacting policy design and compliancy tracking. And so that's very true that, the medical industry may have different controls and requirements than the financial industry, whether the data is at rest, the data is being processed, or the data is being transferred. Those are just general categories of where you would apply controls, and depending on the regulatory environment, the controls or requirements may be different. So a quick discussion, among yourselves for the online course, the discussion would be, how do we assure security policy alignment with business objectives? One way to do that is have the CEO, CIO, and senior people be require their signatures on policies because they impact the organization. And by doing that, uh, the signatories need to read it, understand it, ask questions about it, because ultimately they will be held accountable if something goes wrong or violations of the policy or enforcing violators of the policy. Effective policy should not only meet security needs, but also support productivity and innovation. The balance often requires consultation with business stakeholders, such as your senior executives and your innovators. So it could be your engineers, your marketing reps, sales reps. So that you need to have some balance in that you need to enforce regulatory requirements, but have some grassroots or bottoms up to ensure innovation is still happening at the same time. How does a agile or DevSecOps environment where security policies must allow rapid changes and automated compliancy checks, in particularly for fast-paced organizations with frequent software updates, deploy impact policy alignments? Well, um, security is security. So you still would have policies like multi-factor authentication, with um, um, zero trust um, concepts applied. You still would have secure configuration, um, but you may have different policies on how to release production-ready software into the production environment. You may have different policies on your release management. You may have different policies on how frequent you accept patches, and then maybe based on the severity level. So that will help support, agile and dev secure op environments that require rapid changes. And you may have, different times of the day. So you could be that only after 10 o'clock p.m. And between 5 a.m. you allow patches to happen. so that it doesn't impact the work schedule and it gives you time to roll back before, the morning shift comes in and they start working by 8 a.m. or something like that. One of the things you have to have, and when you are, especially in regulatory environments, but if you have organizational-based policies and procedures, you need compliance tracking and enforcement. So compliance tracking mechanisms such as audits, automated monitoring, and self-assessment checklists, which measures adherence to policies, are really critical. What a lot of organizations do is they outsource the auditing, especially if they're in like the banking industry or medical industry. There's third-party companies that will come in and audit you. A lot of times, a lot of organizations find that's better than employing people full time because the dedicated outside company, that's all they do. So they understand how to um, give you recommendations on how to fix critical issues found in the audit so that you can eventually pass an audit. So they become not only your auditor, but your consultant to help you fix the problems um, because they have that expertise. What a lot of organizations are doing lately is they're taking that results of an audit and they're putting it into their SIEM to help with prioritization and determining what they fix and what they mitigate, what they potentially may not fix in comparison through to the threat landscape. Um, and so that helps with prioritization by ingesting this type of data into a security information and event management system. It's becoming more and more common practice. And so what are they looking for? That means, in these audits, you have to collect metrics for measuring compliance, such as policy adherence and rates, number of policy violations, time taken to close compliance policy gaps. This all help you in your prioritization and assuring that you don't have repeated problems or you didn't fix identifiable issues that came out of the audit in the first place. This is just an infographic that kind of explains, you have to have an executive sponsor of a policy, whether that's your CTO, your CEO at the top, and they would create a charter. The charter could be for the IT department. Within the IT department or the CIO's office, they start to create policies that last 2 to 3 years. Out of that comes standards and guidelines, which we've talked about, and then processes and procedures to help enforce those standards and guidelines. This just gives you a little bit more detail on policies, and if time permit, you definitely want to click on that video and watch on policies and procedures. Just reinforce the definitions we just talked about. This gives you this a little bit more information on standards. Standards will describe how those objectives will be implemented into the infrastructure of the organization. Standards are technical documents, so that's definitely done by the IT manager and their direct report. So IT personnel will help write those standards because they're technology based and they will be technology specific. They even can be version specific too. Security standards set the minimum requirements for protecting assets within the context. So whether it's desktop laptops, your internal network, and your IP laydown, how you segment the network, all that's a part of your standards that you would document. Procedure documents mandate that something be implemented, and then this is the step by step to actually implement or install and configure software. So it is technology specific. Again, it's done at the lower levels by your IT personnel. These mandatory documents specify how requirements in the standard must be achieved. For example, a server standard may be make a requirement, or even a cloud standard, how your servers are backed up in the cloud, what type of cloud storage is used, what type of CPU is used, which could help estimate the cost of that. Configuration for hardening would be documented as a specific procedure. How do you go about disabling and enabling services and ports on a operating system? Procedure documents must also be maintained as part of security governance because they could be a part of an audit. Um, Guidelines are discretionary. If there's a need, there will be described how to implement behavior policies. They are also used to make third party aware of detailed implementations and handling requirements for outline intricate dependencies, such as, if you have a service offering or a cloud website and your cloud website is connected to one of your suppliers, and that supplier provides a list of um, potential products that your customers may buy, um, then the detailed guidelines will talk about how you interface with those organizations or the procedures, and then the guidelines will say, well, here are the requirements from the supplier to give the procedure more detail. Make Guidelines make everyone aware of the day-to-day responsibilities to protect data and the company assets. Guidelines give everyone a clear understanding of how organizations view data confidentiality and how they should judge the sensitivity of any piece of information. Processes describe steps that need to be taken in order to assure that security activity proceeds as planned. Processes can be inferred from a policy and procedure specific, such to those relations in security policy management, strategy, risk, and compliancy, and monitoring. Processes can also be predetermined. One of best known processes could be, or you can also call it the workflow for your incident response. So, what is the process for when an incident happens and how you respond and recover from that incident? So, another discussion would be in the organization, we kind of talk about this, who is responsible for writing policies. That will be out of the CIO organization, probably delegated to the IT manager. Um, and signatures could go up as far as the CEO or CIO. Sometime depends on the type of policy. The CISO may be responsible for signature. Which documents has the most technical detail, policy, procedure, standard, or guidelines? That would be your standards and guidelines would be the most technical out of those. Which document has the least technical details? That would be, of course, a policy, which is at the organizational level. Which role would write procedures? Usually that's someone, your IT organization or network administrator that would actually write procedures. All right, next topic and last topic for this week would be around operating system security. Operating system security is a focus on hardening as one of the primary tools for securing the operating system and the steps that we take to secure the OS. Why? To protect the data, the applications running on it, any sensitive information, any sensitive customer or pricing information that's on the operating system, any account information that could be stored in a file on the operating system. So how do you mitigate operating system risk? You could do it by going through the process of hardening the OS. Hardening of an OS requires that we add tools and applications to operating system that are designed to combat attacks and help mitigate vulnerabilities in the operating system. Some of the things that will help you harden a operating system include disable specific or unused services and ports, remove accounts, in particular accounts with enhanced privileges that are not being used, limit account permissions, or enforce least privileges, request manufacturer server um, hardware attestation, so a secure configuration from the vendor, or recommendations on how to secure um, their product, install or enable monitoring software such as antivirus software or EDR software, and install, either application firewall or host-based intrusion detection system, or modern way of saying that is endpoint detection and response software. Additionally, we can use a large number of security tools that are available to help monitor. We've kind of talked about that. But you also can use tools to help find vulnerabilities in the operating system. These are weaknesses. Some of those tools include Tenable and Qualys scanners. These are well-known vendors in the vulnerability management space. The tools like Tenable, Nexus, and Qualys scanners, not only do they identify vulnerabilities based on the specific OS type and version, but they give you recommendations on how to mitigate those vulnerabilities, or they will go out and get the CVE number. We've talked about that. And go to the vendor's website and see if there's any patches available. It automates that whole process. So general activities, again, we just kind of walk through those, but reduce the number of available avenues for which the operating system can be attacked by hardening it, removing unnecessary software, accounts, making alterations to common accounts to give it least privileges, applying patches in a timely manner. Usually that's on a weekly basis. Unless there's a hot patch to fix a critical issue, you apply it as soon as it become available. And then this last one is making use of logging um, by enabling logging and operating system and then auditing those logs, looking for potential malicious activity or policy violations. Key concepts in operating OS security is uh, principle of least privileges, PLOPLP, emphasizes the importance of restricting user permissions to only what's necessary for their role. Also, role-based access and control can help simplify um, principles of least privileges by assigning permissions to specific job functions rather than individuals. So, engineer, accountant, contracts, marketing, HR, these are all common specific roles, and you can assign permissions to the role and then assign individuals to the role or the group. Um, is logging and monitoring OS events important for operating system security? The answer there is absolutely. An example of that is enabling detailed logging in your Windows event viewer, or using syslog and a system on a Linux system can help detect unauthorized attempts or anomalies on the system. The key part of that is that you have to then monitor the logs, collect them, and have software or a tool that would then parse the logs and identify potential anomalies and malicious activity. So you got to have both. You got to do the logs, maintain your logs, and then also parse and the logs looking for malicious activity. Common OS vulnerabilities such as open ports, outdated patches, and weak default settings are frequently exploited by cyber threat criminals. And again, specific tools like Nexus and Qualys will help you not only identify, but help you with finding patches or how to mitigate those vulnerabilities and help you prioritize too. I forgot to mention that. All right, that's it for week 12. Um, we will see you all soon. Good luck on the quiz.